Hello, everyone, and welcome to GRUFFtalk, where each week we take a deep dive into all the ways we can feel better, look better, live better, and age better. I'm your host, Barbara Hannah Grufferman. Okay, I confess that my absolute biggest fear is losing my memory, or my mind, or both. Like a lot of you, I have good reason. My grandmother had Alzheimer's, and it was painful to watch the agonizing decline leading to her death at the age of 81. It's haunted me for decades. Sure, some memory loss is inevitable as we age, and by the time we reach 50, more than half of us experience some forgetfulness. However, serious cognitive problems and dementia are not an inevitable result of aging. There is much we can do to defend ourselves against them. A few weeks back, I recorded an episode that focused on the key ways you can stay sharp even as you get older, and you should really check that episode out. Just as physical exercise builds muscles, keeping your mind active can generate new brain cells and neural connections even later in life. In fact, the more neural connections you develop, the greater your cognitive reserve, which can help other parts of the brain compensate if one area of your brain is damaged by neurological disease or injury. Pretty amazing, right? Well, here's a little cheat sheet of ways to stay sharp. In addition to exercising your body and your brain, some of the other things you can do include staying engaged, either by continuing to work or through volunteer activities, definitely staying social and spending time with family and friends, reading as much as you can, seeking out activities that call upon you to learn new physical or mental skills, eating foods known to nourish the brain, including green vegetables, nuts, cold water fish, and olive oil, and especially fruit, and especially blueberries, watching your calorie count and maintaining a healthy weight, being aware of how medications can negatively affect your cognition, and reduce or eliminate the use of sleeping pills if you can, and developing good sleeping habits, and be well rested. And super duper important, find ways to reduce stress. So yes, you should absolutely be doing all of these things to keep your brain cells percolating and sharp throughout your life. But some fascinating new research just came out about a gadget that can actually reverse both short-term and long-term memory loss. And guess what, everyone? As soon as I read the research a few days ago, I immediately sent an email to the lead researcher on the study. And wait for it, he's our guest today. Yep. If you know anything about me yet, you know that I don't get all wound up about the possibility of meeting a celebrity. Nope. My knees get a little shaky at the thought of actually talking with brilliant people who are busy working in their labs to help us age better. And that's exactly the kind of person I will be chatting with in a minute. But first, he deserves a very proper introduction. Dr. Rob Reinhardt got his PhD at Vanderbilt University in Nashville and then immediately went over to Boston University, where he is now the director of the Cognitive and Clinical Neuroscience Laboratory. And he's on the faculty in the departments of Psychological and Brain Sciences and Biomedical Engineering. Like, wow. Okay, wow. Rob's research primarily uses electrophysiological measurements, I said it right, yay, of brain activity, computational modeling, non-invasive neuromodulation, and behavior to investigate the mechanisms of visual perception and cognition in healthy younger and older adults and people with neuropsychiatric disorders like schizophrenia. His research includes a lot of really fascinating things, but also, lucky for us, he is also focused on age-related cognitive impairment. He is the principal investigator of 2 studies from the National Institutes of Health. He's the recipient of individual philanthropic support and the grand prize winner of the 2022 Science and PINS, that's PINS prize in neuromodulation, awarded by the American Association for the Advancement of Science. Wow. Wow. I'm sure his mom is very, very proud of him. We have a lot to talk about, so let's go. Hello, Dr. Reinhardt, and welcome to Gruff Talk.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
So, I love to ask this question of my guests. So, what did you have for breakfast today? Can you share?
So let's see. Yeah, I had some figs and blackberries and some walnuts.
Oh, I
Pretty
love
basic.
that. Are you a vegetarian, or are you? Maybe not that indicates that you are, because I also eat, non-meat things for breakfast. But I'm curious.
I guess what it goes by like whole grain, plant-based, a vegan. And I try to eat low in salt, sugar, and oil as well. I've been doing that for about 5 or 6 years with
5 or 6 years. Wow.
wonderful benefits. I'm very much enjoying it. Started out as simply an experiment, and now I can't imagine going back.
That is incredible. I mean, I've done a lot of research on that, and I wish I could say to you, Dr. Reinhardt, I can do it, but I'm not quite ready to give up some of those things that I really enjoy. However, I would say that the vast majority of my eating is plant-based. Like, that's the majority. And so, okay, yay.
Yeah.
Where are you tuning in from? Where are you joining us
I'm
from?
coming in from Boston, where I'm on faculty here at BU.
Yeah. All right. So you're hard at work, and we dragged you out of your lab today to spend some time with us, and I thank you so much for that. Okay.
My
So
pleasure.
you and your team at the Reinhardt Lab at Boston University conducted a study focusing on both short-term and long-term memory issues, which included people 65 and over. The results, which I read about in some articles after it was released, the results were amazing and very, very promising. But before we take a deep dive into the details of that research, please just first talk us through what are the differences between short-term memory and long-term memory?
You bet. So, short term memory is the system in our minds that allow us to hold behaviorally useful information in mind over a period of seconds. So, it works on timescales, seconds. And it's also capacity limited. We can only hold a finite number of objects in our short term memory. It's like imagining the list of food items that we need to repeat to ourselves over and over as we're scanning the grocery store for our milk and eggs and broccoli.
Mm-hmm.
In contrast, long term memory is a huge capacity, it's capacity unlimited buffer store where we can hold information in there on the order of hours, days, months, years, or lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's involving structures like the hippocampus, which many people have heard about, whereas the short term memory system typically involves regions in the front of the brain.
And what are some of the main reasons, based on your research and other people's research, why people in midlife and beyond can start to lose both short-term and long-term memories, and losing which one of those is considered the most serious form of memory loss?
Mm. Yeah, it's an interesting question. I mean, I'm a neuroscientist, so from the perspective of the brain, many things are changing as we age and are associated with forms of pathological aging like Alzheimer's. So there's neurobiological sources that me and colleagues study, such as white matter and gray matter, volume deficits. White matter are like the connecting fibers between brain cells, like
Mm-hmm.
the highway tracks, and the gray matter are the actual cells, the neurons. Volume in the cell bodies themselves and also those connecting fibers decrease with age. Also, the neurotransmitters, the chemicals of the brain, that binding of neurotransmitters and the density of the receptors that receive those chemicals, there's changes there also that are age related. There's lots of neurobiological factors, but the one we're really keen on investigating, most relevant for today's talk, is the functional brain connectivity. So we kind of look at the brain at a really high level, bird's eye level, and look at these big networks that rise and fall very fast that connect many areas together. And these functional brain networks are also changed with age. This is sometimes called like a disconnection hypothesis of aging. in age-related pathology. That is, the brain networks are decoupled or desynchronized as we age. And that kind of gets to some of the goals we had for this research.
Okay, actually, let's now segue right into the research. And I know that you've been doing research. You did some research and the results of that came out in like 2019. This was like a follow-up to that, if I'm not mistaken. So talk to us about this research. What was the goal of this particular study?
Yeah, the goal of the study was to really put this hypothesis to the test that as we age, our brains come desynchronized or decoupled. The brain areas are less correlated. That's important because there's theories in neuroscience that propose that when two brain areas their activities are correlated, that it's like a window is open and the information can now flow between those two regions effectively. Whereas the gate or the window is closed when there's less synchronization, less temporal correlation. The two brain areas are not communicating effectively. And so our goal was to better understand these synchronous brain waves that exist in the brains of older people. We all get older. There's nothing wrong with that, of course. As we get
Absolutely not.
as we get older, we get wiser. And actually, many things remain preserved and even enhanced with age. But there are those other things that tend to sharply decline with increasing age across the adult lifespan. And one of those things is, short-term memory and long-term memory encoding and retrieval.
Talk to me for a minute about that window that you just referenced. I'm a very visual thinker. So of course, now I'm picturing this in my head, actually picturing it in my head. And boy, I hope my window's open. And knock, knock, knock. And how do you know when someone's window is closed or open or partly open? Is there a scan or is it based on performance and tests or a combination?
We use non-invasive, safe recording electrical brain activity. We put electrodes that go into something like a swimmer's cap. We put the cap over your head and we can just pick up on the snap, crackle, pop of your brain activity non-invasively and safely we all have this like weather storm of electromagnetic energy hovering around our head at any given moment, all the time. And we can just detect that with EEG, electroencephalography, the electrodes in a cap that you wear over the head. And we can test this idea. It's called communication through coherence. So your brain is communicating with itself when the window is open, when there's coherence. And coherence specifically means it's about timing. So are these two brain activities in tempo? Are they synchronized? Are they temporally correlated? And when they're correlated, the window is open and communication can be more effectively conveyed between and within brain regions. That's the basic idea. So it's like a gate or a window.
So how did you conduct this study? How was it done?
So the study is you come into the lab and we put one of these swimmer caps on you, this nylon elastic cap. It has sensors embedded in it that in this last study, we didn't record EEG. We've done that before. We do that a lot. Mm-hmm. But in this study, the sensors are actually delivering electrical current to the brain, not just passively recording it. And you wear this cap, and we've designed a specialized, safe, non-invasive electrical brain stimulation procedure where you have these tiny little stimulating electrodes. We configure them in a special way so we can funnel the current just to affect tiny little pieces of brain tissue that have been previously implicated in memory processing, short-term or long-term. And one of the big basic science takeaways is that frequency matters. We know it's not just space. Yes, space matters in the brain. Mm-hmm. Where particular pieces of brain tissue are in the brain, they have specific mental functions. But we discovered and kind of really established in this study that frequency matters, that timing matters. So the brain activity in that region, if it's resonating, humming along at a low frequency or a high frequency, that's also really important. That's telling us something because information is conveyed on a waveform, right? That's how we're being able to communicate right now. Mm-hmm. But it's also the brain communicates through these electrical impulses. So frequency matters a lot. And that also was involved in the protocol we designed. So you're wearing a swimmer's cap. It's fitted with many electrodes. The electrodes are configured in a certain way to target various brain regions. And the current that we're applying, this extremely weak electrical current, is also a sinusoidal wave. It's like a sine wave. And it's a sine wave at a certain frequency. It's fast or it's slow. Slow is theta, fast is gamma.
Hmm.
And so we targeted the frontal part of the brain at a fast frequency, and the more posterior, the back part of the brain, called parietal region, at a slow frequency. And we did that very deliberatively because those frequencies and those brain regions have been implicated in memory processing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Did you try to reverse that at all? And then you found that this was the correct protocol, or?
Exactly. There's been some kind of inconsistent findings in the literature as to like space and frequency. And so we really wanted to nail this down and say, are these the correct locations? Are these the correct frequencies? And so we switched everything around and we applied low frequency in the frontal part of the region and high frequency in the posterior region. And we found double dissociation between the memory system that's modulated, short-term, long-term, on one hand, and on the other hand, the spatial and the spectral, the spatial and the frequency components of the stimulation or the mechanism that's modulated on the other hand. So this mechanism, this brain network, is humming along at different speeds, and it's also existing in different locations in the brain. And we can isolate and tap into those different networks and upregulate one or upregulate the other. And this way we have this kind of flexibility. We can increase just your short-term memory, or we can rescue or enhance just your long-term memory.
That's really incredible. And again, this study was conducted, tell me if I'm right or wrong about this, on people 65 and over and up to under 90. Am I correct? What was the age range?
That's correct. I think it was 65 to 88. So these are older individuals. Most of them are rather robust. 65 is not old, and 70 is not old, but we get a little, into the older range when we get over to 88. We all slow down a little. Nothing wrong with that as we get older. And, I just maybe jump ahead a little real quick in terms of the range of ages of individuals we had in the study. One really interesting finding was that the people with the poorest cognitive performance in the study showed the largest benefits.
That's incredible.
We think this bodes really well for maybe porting the protocol over to a proper clinical trial with people with Alzheimer's or related dementias who are really suffering from memory impairments.
And so for the most part, the people who participated in the study were like a normal range for their age group of cognitive functioning? Or,
yes,
okay.
Exactly. Yeah. No one in the study had any formal diagnosis of a memory disorder.
Okay.
However, we note that some of the older individuals were roughly in this range of mild cognitive impairment, the precursor, potentially, to Alzheimer's disease. So we did have people that were quite low cognitive functioning. But technically, it's kind of healthy, normal, older adults, 65 to 88. And we chose that population, again, because we want to put this hypothesis to the test that as we age, our brains come less synchronized. And we're using a type of stimulation that hopefully resynchronize and boost memory.
Right, and keeps that window open. That's what I'm going to hold on to. I really love that visual. It's like you want to keep that window up as best you can. So,
exactly. Keep the window up.
Yeah.
Maybe another visual or idea that's simple to convey is kind of putting your brain state back into a mode of functioning that existed in your own life maybe 20, 30 years ago.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Right. Going back.
The window was more open when you were younger.
Going back.
Yeah.
It's so interesting. I interviewed someone a couple of years ago for an article, a psychologist, and he was talking about how, give us a little break here, some grace as we get older. We are carrying so much stuff like in file cabinets in our brains, much more than a 20-year-old. And that
No,
maybe it
that's
takes
true.
us a little more time to retrieve the information that we want to try to pull out of the filing cabinet in our brains when when we need to. So that's also a thought that's been really I've held on to as well. Is okay, give us a little slack here, everyone. But so
Absolutely.
the outcome of this particular study, if you can just kind of share what I mean, you did mention one great piece of news that you found that it worked really, really well, exceptionally well with those older people who had more of cognitive functioning issues. But
Mhm.
tell us, what was the outcome of the study?
The outcome was we can bring older people into the lab. We can run them through this protocol. This is non-invasive, safe, extremely weak electrical current applications. I should mention you can barely even feel the current when it's running. It's so weak. It's one of the features of this type of approach. It's not like electroshock therapy. It's not like transcranial magnetic stimulation. These other approaches your listeners might be familiar with, which are orders of magnitude stronger in the electrical current that's being used. This is so weak that you cannot even make a cell fire. Animal studies show you can't make a cell fire. What you're doing is you're entraining, you're locking, you're affecting the time of the brain activities when they fire, but you're not making them fire. It's what in neuroscience it's called you can't induce de novo firing. If there's no firing there to begin with, you can't make a cell fire. That's why it's not like a brain zapper or a brain stimulator. It's really brain modulation. That
Mm-hmm.
is, your brain is naturalistically humming along at some frequency. There's some pool of cells that are expressing themselves at some frequency. They're active. Then you come in with the stimulation that's so incredibly weak and you dial on it. You dial it up or you dial it down. But you're
Mm-hmm.
not inducing firing that wasn't there. So people receive this type of brain modulation that's weak, safe, non invasive for 4 consecutive days, 20 minutes each day. And as I said, it's barely noticeable. You feel a slight tickling and itching and sensation, warming, poking sensation during the first minute. And then it dissipates as your skin habituates to it. And you don't feel anything after that. But of course, we can show in our experiments that you're systematically improving your behavior, improving your cognitive performance. So you go through this procedure for 4 consecutive days, and we can see your memory gradually ramping up in the benefits produced by the stimulation. One of the really cool findings was the rate of change, like how fast your brain is positively responding to the stimulation. As you're showing us through your behavior that you're remembering more and more and more as the days go by, relative to another group of individuals who got the placebo, who
Mm.
don't see those changes.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, we always use a sham or placebo control, and we always also replicate the work in an independent cohort of individuals. We really want to be sure, right, it replicates in spades before we publish anything. Well, that rate of change during the intervention of memory enhancements was predictive of the benefit we saw 1 month later. So that was really interesting because you can easily imagine that might be a very important value to a clinician, a physician later down the road if this becomes available in a clinic, right? Like how you respond during the intervention is going to be highly predictive of how potent, how long lasting the effects are going to last for you, the individual.
So, based on your research, again, 4 consecutive days, a really short amount of time, 20 minutes, I think I heard you say. And then a month later, you still saw the effects of I saw in some articles, the brain zapper,
Right.
of the
I
brain
know.
zapper. I don't know if you like that term or not, but
Well, it's clever. No, I appreciate it. But
and but you know at this time what happened 3 months later?
not yet. We're investigating that now. We
Mm-hmm.
know the effects last for at least 1 month, potentially longer. And just to remind your listeners, these are memory enhancements that we're seeing in auditory, verbal, short term memory, and long term memory. And so, another critical finding was we have this flexibility now, as we're showing. We can selectively stimulate just the front of the brain and enhance your long term memory for words In the experiment, it was words, it was auditory, verbal information, words. Or we can stimulate at low frequency the parietal region and selectively enhance your short-term memory without changing long-term memory. And conversely, we can selectively enhance long-term memory without changing short-term memory. These are separate systems that we can dial on and enhance one or the other individually.
So in other words, Dr. Reinhardt, if I want to beat my husband at Wordle, which is sometimes very hard to do, I could just kind of crank it up in one part of my brain, retrieve those words.
That's right. You have the competitive advantage.
Wow, I love it. So, I mean, it sounded like you had a couple of surprises, like, the older group really benefiting even more than anybody else from this whole process. But were there any other surprises from this study? Like, wow, we weren't setting out to figure this out, but wow, look at this. Anything like that happening?
I would have two responses to that. I mean, I think the 1 month duration of the effects, it was really surprising.
Mm-hmm.
But my other response is, I think a lot of the findings in the sciences more broadly, when they come to be seen by the investigators and their students, it really strikes us as with more like calm satisfaction than surprise and like emotion.
Mm-hmm.
Because, science is so like agonizingly long of a process. We have all the theory and infrastructure, and we're kind of anticipating a certain pattern of results. And we've kind of seen lots of pilot data, and there's a lot of stuff to suggest what we're going to see on the literature. So it's kind of such a long drawn out process. There's less of a single aha moment and more of a kind of calm satisfaction.
That's not, you know what? I like that answer a lot. That's great. I mean, you all put so much work, time, thinking, strategies into all of this, that to have a test, to have this whole procedure come out kind of very much in your favor and even better than you had anticipated has got to be wonderfully satisfying. After this short break, we'll continue our conversation about new ways to stay sharp. Stay tuned. We're back with Dr. Rob Reinhardt from Boston University talking about his newest research on memory loss. So, Dr. Reinhardt, I read an article about this research, really, which is what caused me to call you and, seek you out and have this chat, that said this cap, this brain zapper with electrodes, might actually be available for home use at some point. How far into the future do you really think this is? Like, in my lifetime, or?
Maybe. We're kind of cautiously optimistic, but there's kind of good reasons to wait. We have these processes, that are established, like the clinical trial, different stages of clinical trials that the research has to pass through before it becomes FDA approved.
Absolutely.
And that can take a long time. It was really, I think it's maybe something like 14 years on average. I forget the exact time, but it's some years. It was really
may I interject there a comment from just a layman person? That's crazy. Okay, wanted to say it.
Maybe 14 is wrong. I'm sorry. I don't know the exact. It might be like maybe it's 6. But what was remarkable? Well, I mean, so what the good thing about that is that's to determine efficacy and safety, and you really want to go through those checks before you let something out. Right.
For sure. Especially when you're putting something like on your brain,
Absolutely.
Yes. No, or anything. Yes.
Absolutely. You want to be sure nothing can go wrong. And so that's for good reason. I should say, as most people know, with this dreadful pandemic, one thing that was great that came out of it in terms of science was not just the vaccine, but how we went about producing that vaccine, right? The procedure was novel, this like staggered approach where they were able to produce it so fast by staggering the stages of the clinical trials with overlap. So as one stage overlapped with another, we didn't do that before. Usually we waited for the results after one stage to go on to the next stage, but they overlapped. So it was an incredibly brilliant, efficient design.
It was amazing. I'm still amazed by it. It was
I
like
imagine
a
that's going to
miracle.
influence. I imagine that will influence how we conduct clinical trials in the future when we want to go through in a proper, like safe, efficient way. So it could be a lot sooner, this type of stimulation approach available for people in the clinic than I can imagine. So I think potentially, certainly within your lifetime. For example, we saw transcranial magnetic stimulation, kind of a sister stimulation approach, become FDA approved in 2008. And that's now available in the clinic if you have a kind of more cutting edge clinic, doctor who's trained to apply this
Right.
for particularly targeting a region called the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, this frontal part of the region, brain, to help people with major depressive disorder, MDD. So we
Mm-hmm.
know TMS can, particularly individuals with MDD who are not responding well to the conventional kind of first line treatments. So that went through. So I don't see why. So there's precedent, and I don't see why this
There's
can't.
precedent, and so you're very hopeful, and also because we all know the sheer number of people who are getting older and heading in that direction. We know the sheer number of people who have Alzheimer's and dementia and other issues with cognitive functioning as they get older. So knowing that there is something that could help, I'm really hopeful that this will speed up the process. I really, really am.
It's remarkable that I believe it's every 65 seconds someone is diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. So
Yes. Mm-hmm.
it's increasing astronomically, and especially expected to rise even more dramatically as the baby boom generation hits the at-risk age range, as the global population rapidly ages, especially in developing countries like Colombia. They've kind of exploding numbers
Yep.
of Alzheimer's disease. But what surpasses the prevalence of Alzheimer's disease is just normal cognitive decline, the kind we all are expected to experience. Is a much larger segment of the population that it just experiences the normal, healthy aging cognitive decline. And that's why we're also interested, certainly in the pathological aging disorders like Alzheimer's, but also in just healthy cognitive decline for people that want to recover some of that memory in their 70s and 80s and 90s.
Exactly right. And also, there's another area of aging, it's kind of thrown into aging, if you will, or midlife, that I am very focused on, and that's menopause. I also publish with an endocrinologist a weekly menopause cheat sheet newsletter focusing on menopause. And I'm really curious if you have any studies, any research you've done that is specific to the brain fog, which is a real thing for not all women, but many women who are going through menopause. And I wonder if this could be applied to that.
Yeah, I am very interested in that question
Mm-hmm.
because the brain fog in menopause, but also in long or post-COVID, the
Yes,
syndrome, where
correct.
people are reporting brain fog among other symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can enhance executive functions like short-term memory that rely on the frontal part of the brain, potentially, yeah, this could be applied for individual with brain fog. That'd be a really interesting direction to take this research,
Oh,
and
I hope you
obviously super
do.
timely.
I'm going to stay in touch with you big time, Dr. Reinhardt, about this.
Please do.
Yeah, and I'm going to
Yeah,
like nag you. Hey, a little email. Hello, it's just Barbara checking in with you. Have you done that research yet?
I have a personal stake in that because my wife has long COVID and symptoms,
Oh, I'm so
and that
terribly
brain.
sorry about
I
that.
know. So I would be very interested in taking that direction. Right now, we are, in terms of future directions, we're looking at memory and Alzheimer's disease
Mm-hmm.
and cognition and schizophrenia and reducing symptoms of obsessive compulsive disorder.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So those are kind of the latest threads, but it would be really interesting to look at brain fog.
Yeah, brain fog,
If we could
menopause,
address
brain fog,
that.
long
Yeah,
COVID, absolutely.
right.
And I certainly wish your wife well with this and hope it passes, soon. So that's some more stuff that you're working on, it sounds like, in the Reinhardt lab at the moment, kind of applying. And I can imagine that this technology can be applied to so many other things pertaining to, brain issues like the ones you just mentioned. But in addition to, and I am going to keep calling it the brain zapper because it's fun. In addition to the brain zapper, as we call it, what else do you think people should be doing in midlife to stay sharp as they get older? Because we don't always want to rely on like that magic bullet. I always believe and talk a lot about the holistic approach, exercise and eating. I feel like the way you eat, quite frankly, has been shown to help with brain health. But what are your thoughts on this?
Oh, this is a whole other conversation that I would love to have. There's so much to say. It's so interesting. One of my biggest pastimes is to learn about how food and other lifestyle measures impact health and disease. So definitely diet and lifestyle play a huge role in prevention of chronic diseases, including age-related diseases like Alzheimer's. So have a meatless Monday. Kind of get more of those. You don't have to go all the way. Like you were saying before, you don't have, actually what the research shows is fascinating. The more you get the fruits and veggies on the plate can accrue significant benefits. So you don't have to go all the way to vegan if that scares you or something. Just get, any physician would tell you the same. They just want you to be a little healthier. If you need to go all the way, fine. But any step you can make to eat more healthfully can accrue massive benefits over time. And so cleaning up someone's diet, right? Get the animal products off your plate, the processed junk, more whole foods, fruits, veggies, beans, legumes, split peas, lentils, nuts, seeds.
Yep.
Actually, the biggest risk factor is too little fruit that's causing. And then the second one was not enough nuts and seeds. And the third one was too little plants. I mean, the US population has kind of like a fiber deficiency problem. It's like literally 2% of individuals in the US, regardless of their diet, are getting the adequate amount of fiber. Whereas 98, a huge overwhelming majority is getting twice as much as the minimum recommended amount of protein. So cleaning up one's diet, more fruits and veggies, lifestyle, like you said, getting to bed on time.
Yep. Keeping stress at bay. Stress is an issue too, I think, for brain health.
Stress less, love more. I mean, it's famous father of lifestyle medicine, Dean Ornish's mantra. Eat well, stress less, love more, move more. 40 minutes of brisk exercise every day. That's what the research shows. But the only reason the research shows that that's what's recommended is because that's as far as the research has gone. We only had gone to 20 minutes of brisk exercise a day, and that was the recommended. That was years ago. Then it was 30. Now it's 40 just because we've gone out and done the studies. It seems like the more you put out, the more benefits there are. So certainly moving more, rest, stress less, yoga, meditation, love more, eat better, get to bed on time. And also like social intellectual interaction, exchange, challenge are critical.
So critical.
The bicycle theory of aging. It's like stay on the bike, keep going, keep interacting with people socially and intellectually. And that keeps the brain humming along.
Dr. Reinhardt, what can you tell us about yourself? I mean, clearly you're really, really, really into this. What motivated you to take this particular path in your career?
It's all about finding inspiration for me. I wasn't galvanized until after I graduated college. I found just, I guess by historical accident, some individuals that just utterly inspired me. Noam Chomsky, Bertrand Russell. They were historical figures. They weren't necessarily alive. Steve Weinberg, the famous kind of Nobel laureate in physics. Carl Sagan, just the mega intellectuals. Go out and find the people who are, not just Nobel laureates, but Nobel laureates, like the big, big thinkers. And they will inspire you. They can't not inspire you. Once you're inspired and intellectualized, you just whatever you want to do in life, you're going to chase it with a hunger and an appetite. And no one really understands what's going on. It's kind of miraculous to understand why you why you can learn so much in such a small, compressed amount of time when you're truly inspired. So dial up your curiosity and get
Yes.
inspired. And that's what just keeps me feeling in touch with what's alive inside me every day.
Yeah. Oh, that's so wonderful. And also, all of that will also help with your brain cells. There's no question about that, too. Staying intellectually curious. And yeah, all good. Wow. You are coming back on. That's it. You are, for sure. Okay. This was absolutely incredible. And I'm really relieved to know that there will be something I can someday pop onto my head whenever I feel like my memory might be slipping, or if I really want to do a great New York Times crossword puzzle and beat my husband. Very, very comforting, right? So we're going to have links to articles about the research and other good information in the show notes, of course, and also on my website. But before we let you leave, can you give the GRUFFtalk audience just a few takeaways of what you really, really, really want them to remember about our conversation today?
Well, first, just thank you, Barbara. I love your energy and what you're doing here. I'm so happy to participate to help spread the word. As I was mentioning to you off air, I really feel a responsibility to share with the public in understandable terms what we're doing in the labs, because honestly, the public bankrolls us. The risk and the cost associated with research is paid for by the public. Our funds come from the state, right? National Science Foundation, National Institutes of Health. And so I feel it as a responsibility to convey back to the public what we're finding doing the research that they supported us to do. The big takeaways, I think prevention is what pound of prevention is worth an ounce of cure. I think prevention is really where it's at. As these radical diet and lifestyle changes that we mentioned very briefly. But in the case where you need like acute intervention, of course, no amount of broccoli is going to help. Like you need help right now. And that's where modern medicine is just miraculous. It's just fantastic. Whatever pill, whatever procedure. Yes, there's problems with that. And that's where we're kind of coming in to try to open up an entirely new realm of treatment options for people who need help right now, tomorrow, particularly with respect to cognitive brain disorders like from schizophrenia, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, Tourette's, ADHD, the whole kind of realm of cognitive brain disorders, neurological and neuropsychiatric. And we are making baby steps and we are making progress to that end. So like you said, hopefully sometime in our lifetime, these types of new procedures will be available in the doctor's office, but also maybe also available just to the general public who needs a little, people are interested in augmentation, right? That's why we maybe drink coffee to give us
that little boost,
and vigilance and attention.
You're right.
Why we drink wine at the end of the day to relax and decompress. So people are always kind of consuming and using these tools of the mind to modify themselves in various preferred directions, and kind of safe, non-invasive electrical stimulation could potentially enter that realm as well, in addition to the doctor's office. We're seeing kind of light at the end of the tunnel. We're cautiously optimistic. We hope we can help people with serious brain disorders, as well as the general public if they have interest.
Thank you. You are amazing. And I really, really thank you and your team back at the Reinhardt Lab for all the good work that you are doing on our behalf. Thank you so much. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Thanks for tuning in, everyone. If you enjoyed this episode of GRUFFtalk, please do two things. First, share it with all your friends and family, and subscribe to GRUFFtalk wherever you listen to podcasts, including YouTube, so you never miss a single episode. Until next time, remember this: we can't control getting older, but we can control how we do it. Talk to you soon.